So the first part here today will be to go over the general operation of a temp-F unit. This unit is an rg1000. It is very similar to all units in that rg1000 to the rg6500 range. They all operate the same way, have the same damper components. So let's take a look at the damper here. So for startup, the first thing to check is damper operation, and how that's done is with this S1 switch down here. So for the purpose of this video, I'll just disable the exhaust and supply fans, relay 3 and 4. The supply fan is controlled by relay number 3, labeled right here, and the return fan or exhaust by relay 4. So to pull them out, there's this orange tab right at the bottom here. You pull it towards you and down. The same on both relays, and then you're able to just pull the relay block off the base. So then to test actuator M6, the actuator up here on the top right, we'll put S1 switch to position 2. And then what we're looking for is the amount of deflection of this bolt here. When the damper is in the closed position, this position right now, this bolt will move back because of the tension of the blades, and we don't want to see any more than 1/8 of an inch of movement. So how we could check that is either by taking a wrench or, let's say, a screwdriver. Just hold it up to the end of the bolt. Right here, on the weakest position of this backing plate, isn't moving back by more than 1/8 of an inch. So let's say I put my hand on the frame of the damper box and the screwdriver over the top of the bolt. As the damper is closing, that bolt shouldn't move more than 1/8 of an inch away from my screwdriver tip. So in this case, I see about 1/16 of an inch that the bolt is pulling in, which is a good sign. There is no clonking noise as the blade is opening and closing, which is a good sign. Now let's say that bolt moved by more than 1/8 of an inch. What you would have to do is adjust the length of this linkage. So you would loosen these two nuts right here and then extend the center to center distance. Basically spread these bolts apart, and that'll reduce the tension on the blade. If that still doesn't solve the issue, you would loosen the nut in the back here and move the bolt up in the slot. So that's actuator M6. Actuator M7 is very much the same thing. So putting switch S1 to position 1 cycles the other actuator. And then we'll do the bolt check again. Same thing, about 1/16 of movement, so we're good here. Now for limit switches, these white Creuset switches, there's 6 on each damper. There's the closed position switch, the open position switch, and the proof of open switch. These 3 switches are linked to the controls of this actuator. Then M7 actuator is controlled by the closed open position switch and this proof of open right here. So to check whether the switch is in the right position, you would just take a flat screwdriver, lift up the arm, and you should see the roller come off the surface by at least 1/16 of an inch. We're getting even more than that, so that's a good sign. Now, to check the open position, we're just going to cycle the damper manually. So to do that, you would first look at the wiring diagram. So actuator M6 on the wiring diagram is controlled by relay 2. So if I lift the blue tab, we're manually overriding the PLC controller and the switch. So now the actuator is continuously rotating, lower the orange lever in the bottom, and then you can just pull out the relay and stop the damper motor in any position you want. So let's say we want to check the open position. I'm just going to move the actuator to the open position. Do the same check again. How much displacement do we have on the arm of the limit switch? So lift it up, looks like 1/8 of an inch. Perfect, no problem here. So once I put the relay back in, it's going to go to the closed position. We'll do the same check on M7, the second actuator. So the closed position limit switch is okay. The open position is okay as well. Now, what we're also going to test is the proof of open switches. So I'm going to leave the relay out for now. If this actuator moves, it pushes down the crank arm, pushes on this rod, so we need to be looking at this limit switch here. So as you can see, the limit switch is too tight in this case. If I push it up, the roller doesn't come off the surface of that nylon collar. So what we need to do is loosen the screws that hold the limit switch in place and try to rotate the limit switch away from the collar. If that doesn't solve the issue, then we'll have to take the top screw out and re-drill with the 1/16 drill bit. So let's just check the first M6 actuator, see if we have the same issue there. So I'm going to open up the damper here. There we go. And then we'll push on the arm. Yeah, this one is good. It's lifting off the surface, 1/16 of an inch spacing. So no problem here. So out of the 6 limit switches, there's one that needs adjustment. We'll take the relay out to make sure the actuator doesn't move while we're working on the limit switch. And then we'll just loosen the top screw here. And try to rotate the switch away as much as we can. Okay, I can't get to the second screw right now because the arm is in my way. So I'm going to move the actuator to the closed position. There we go. Pull the relay out again to make sure the actuator doesn't move while you're working on the switch. Loosen that screw. Rotate it as much as you can. Tighten the screws back down. Okay, and then we'll cycle the actuator again. Stop in the open position. There we go. Now it lifts off by 1/16 of an inch. Relay is back in. Engage the lock, the orange lever in the bottom. So that's it for limit switches. What you also want to check is make sure these damper linkages are all greased. So as you can tell right here, these grease nipples look very clean. So they haven't been greased in the field. They came pre-greased from the factory, but haven't been greased after. Okay, so what we need to check here, this unit has been running for 4 years, and we want to make sure that the linkage rods are still in good condition. So we take the tension off of these rods by opening the actuator, basically stopping the cam on the open position switch. And then we should be able to rotate it easily, but there shouldn't be any slack in or out. So basically, as I'm pulling it, it shouldn't be coming in or out at all. There's a little bit of slack here, but that's still okay. So this unit has been running for 4 years. If you look at the back here, no slack at all, just rotates. Nothing at all. This looks perfect. The first rod end that's going to wear out is this one up on top, because it sees the most amount of stress. It basically takes the stress off of this shaft and that shaft. And it also goes through a full 360-degree rotation. That's why it starts wearing out first. All the other ones, they only rotate by 90 degrees. So after we check that, we'll close M6. We'll do the same check on M7. So a bit more slack. It pulls out about 1/16 of an inch. No wear here. These ones are all good. What you also want to check is make sure you can actually rotate it. Sometimes these rod ends are misaligned, and what happens is that one rod end hits the nut on the upper side, the other rod end is going to hit it on the lower side, and you're not able to rotate the rod at all. And what happens then, as it moves back and forth, the angle slightly changes and it starts wearing that the brass bushing on the rod end itself. So let's say they are misaligned. All you would do is take a 1/2 inch wrench to this side, loosen this nut a little bit, line them up, and then tighten the nut back on. So as far as greasing goes, let's just close the dampers here. Put my fan relays back in. We'll use a grease gun with NLG1 grade 2 lubricant as specified in the manual. We'll just push it on the nipple and give it about 3 pumps. And you should see grease coming out between the stainless steel sphere and the brass bushing. Okay, so we're good on this nipple. It's kind of tight to get to. There we go. Grease coming out right there. Okay, and then we would repeat that same procedure for the other 3 linkages. Once we're done, just clean up the nipple. Make sure we're not accumulating any dust on it for the next time around when we come and grease them. So that would be the main components we would need to check at startup on the rg1000 to 6500. First, make sure your dampers are cycling properly, they're not set to tight. Second, check the limit switches that they're in the proper position. And third, just confirm that the damper rods are greased and operate properly.